Hey dev team, welcome back to Flutter with Drag. Now, in the last episode, we managed to create our first part of our screen for our app, which is wonderful. We now need to work on the background as we decided, but before we do that, we're just going to do a little bit of tidy up. Not much, but there's a few little things that I forgot in the end of the last episode. The first one is in the header. We set the height for the blue at the top, the whole profile and the timer section, and we said that once we'd finished that we would take out the height because it's no longer needed. Well, we didn't do that, so over in the header.dart, that's the first thing we're going to do, is remove that, and you'll see now that the header shrinks up to fit the space exactly, which is what we want. And should it expand, it will automatically expand. That height was just a placeholder for us. Okay, that's it really. Let's continue. Now, within our main file, we have our app header and our app menu, and those are in the column. And that column is what is going to become the sidebar, the whole sidebar. So I'm going to extract that widget, and I'm going to call that sidebar, and that is going to be taken out, and I'm going to put that into its own file. So within the sidebar folder, we're going to create a new folder. No, we're not. We're going to create a new file called sidebar.dart and take out the sidebar from the main, cut, paste it into the sidebar.dart, add our material, import. We need to add the header. Now, because they're in the same folder, I'm going to just import the header like that. It doesn't really matter which one you choose, whether you choose the package Flutter sidebar menu or the menu. I tend to do it when it's in the same folder. I intend to import it that way because then it's clear it's all part of the same thing. I'm going to put a comma there just to force the formatting, and that's our sidebar done. We don't need to do anything else with it. Within our main.dart, we now need to import the sidebar. So we will do that, and I'm going to put a comma there again to force the formatting. And at the top now, we've got some underlined, blue underlined here, telling us that we're no longer using these imports. So just to tidy up, we'll take those out. And that's our sidebar now taken care of. The other thing I'm going to do is within our side header, we've got this safe area. I'm going to remove it from here. So again, with refactoring, I'm going to select remove this widget, and I'm going to if we save that, you'll see that our profile picture now sort of heads up behind the status bar, but I'm going to put it here within the scaffold itself, and I'm just going to add it straight in here by adding a new widget, wrap with widget, and safe area. And that will return things to normal, but it will help us out in the next part that we're about to do. Okay, so that's our sidebar done. Now we need to do is have a look at our design again. And we have in this design, we have this background that we need to try and figure out what we're going to do. And the designer hasn't really given us much information here. We can sort of see at the top that there is that 4:17, so presumably that's part of the main time, the 01:24:17, and there's a little progress sort of indicator above it, and then the other items, the three below it, are presumably past timed events, so with an edit icon. But that's all we've got. That's the information we've got. So really we're on our own here. We're making this up as we go along. So let's return back to our code. and decide how we're going to do this. For now, I'm going to get rid of our sidebar completely, just like that, and put in a container, spelled right, which will basically blank out our app and give us a completely new starting page again. But that's okay. We will work around this as we go. Now, how are we going to do this? Well, there's a number of different ways, but we're going to start with, within the container, we're going to have a row. The child of the container is going to be a row. And the row is going to have children, and it's going to have two things. First of all, we're going to have a bit of text explaining what the time is related to, so the name of the event that has been timed. So let's put that in, and I'm just going to put my event 1, which is great. And then secondly, we're going to put a column, and the column is going to have the children, and the top is going to be an icon, which is going to be the pencil, which is edit, sorry, it's the edit icon. And below that, the actual time itself. So we'll put the text 01/24/17. Okay, that should give us something. It has, but it's nothing like what we really want it to be. It's going to take a little bit of fiddling to get this right. Okay, so how are we going to do this? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to set the height of the row, first of all, to be, sorry, not the row, the height of the column here to be as small as possible. At the moment it's expanding to take up basically the whole screen, and we don't want that. We only want it to be having the pencil icon and the time. So what we're going to do is put in a main access size min, and what that will do is it will sort of suck it all up so that that column only takes up the minimum amount of space rather than the maximum amount of space it can. Okay, that's a reasonable start. Next, we're going to look at the row, and within the row we are going to set it to have some space between the event name and the title. Basically, we want the edit pencil and the time to be pushed over to the right hand side, and the way we can do that is by setting the main axis alignment to main axis alignment space between. And what that will do is it will put in as much space between the two items within the row. And because we're dealing with a row and not a column, the main axis is the left to right, rather than if it was a column, the main axis would be the top to bottom. Okay, still not quite right. We're going to need to, within the container, put some padding, because we don't really want it hitting the edge just like that. But I don't want the padding on the top and the bottom. I only want it on the left and the right hand side. So I'm going to put in an symmetric only on the horizontal 20, and that will suck those two items in together a little bit and give us our padding that we want. Okay, now we need to edit this icon. It's a bit too big. Well, first of all, we want to set the color, and we can do that with our app colors gray. We've already predefined that color, so that will be okay there. And we want it a bit smaller, and I think 20 is probably about right. That looks okay, but I don't want the app icon, I don't want the edit icon centered above the time. I want it pushed all the way over to the right. So again, in this column, what we're going to do is change the cross-axis alignment to cross-axis alignment end. So the start would be the left-hand side, the end is the right-hand side, and that gives us the layout that I think we want. Maybe we want to put a little bit of space between the icon and the text. So let's try that. And let's put in a size box with height of, let's try 5, see if that's good enough for us. Yeah, I think that would be okay. So that's really all I want to do for that. We haven't got much more information from the designer, so I think that will be okay. But we need more than one of them. If we look at the design, again, we've got 3 or 4 of those behind, and so we're going to need to put those into something to produce that list. There's also, if we look, a sort of spacer between each one, this horizontal line. Okay, so let's take the container as a whole, and I'm going to extract that to its own widget, which I'm going to call event item. Okay, now we have that event item, and like we did with the menu items in the previous episode, what we need to do is set this up so that we can pass the information such as the time and the text into it. And we'll do that again in the same way by setting a final string. We'll call this, well, we'll call it text. And for now, also final string time. We need to ensure that we include those into our constructor. And I'm going to set them both to be required because without them the thing won't work. As simple as that. Okay, so by doing that we've now got an error up here. So I'm just going to copy the text up to here, and we're going to put in the text, my event 1, and we'll copy the time and set the time to that. That's fine. Save that. And instead of using the text here, we're actually going to use the information we've just passed in. So the text and the time. Okay, that means now we can pass in more of these event items. So we could put them into a column or something else and have as many as we need. And that brings us to the next question, is how many are we going to have? Are we going to limit our users to however many we can fit on the screen, or do we want more? And I think we want to say that actually the users can have as many as they want. So how do we do that? Well, instead of putting this into a column, we're going to put it into something else. And what we're going to put it into is a list. So I'm just going to comment that bit out for a second. We need to come back to that. And instead we're going to put in a list view. And the list view has a few things, but we're going to take this builder one for now. We'll probably be changing that in a minute. And the list view builder is going to allow us to create a function which takes a context and an index and return something. Return what? Well, let's have a look at this. If we were to return text, hello world, just like that and save that. Let's see what happens. Well, we've now got a hello world which scrolls infinitely. Excellent. That's not what we need. Nope. What we want, instead of returning the hello world, we want to return our event item. So let's take that and put that instead of this hello world text and just remove our comment. And now we've got our event being displayed infinitely. Again, not quite what we want. We want to limit the number of times that is shown and displayed. So let's just put a comma in here to get some formatting. And we can do that within the list view builder by, instead of returning just the item builder that we've got, we can also return a few other things, and one of those is item count. And we can set our item count to 4. And now when we save that, we have our 4 events. And even better, they don't scroll because they don't go off the screen. But if we had more events, if we change that to 40, they do go off the screen and we can scroll all the way down to the last one. Okay. But now we've got another problem, is that we don't want our event 1 being returned all the time. If we're going to have 4, we want our event 1, event 2, event 3 and event 4 displayed. So how do we do that? Well, what we need to do is create a list. And again, there's a few different ways of doing this, but we're going to create a list of items. What's a list? Well, we have used lists before. If we come down to this column and we look at the children, we can see that it is a list of widgets, and that's what we're passing into it. The first widget is an icon, the second widget is a size box, and the third widget is a text. It's a list of things, and a list is contained within the square brackets. So coming up to the top here, we can create a list of our events simply by putting inside square brackets our events. 1, 2, 3 and 4. Now we've got lots of errors here. What's going on? Well, it has no idea what all this is. We need to actually tell it that we're creating a list, and we do that by putting lists within the triangular brackets, the type of list item it is. So let's put in widget, and let's give this a name, and we'll call it timed events. And our timed events is going to equal that. Now we're getting a complaint here, and the complaint is because it's a stateless widget and various other things, it needs to be final, and it can no longer be a constant because of the changes we're making here. So we just need to remove the constant. Okay, so now we've created our own list called timed events, and we can use that later on. But what we can do, instead of returning this event, we can return our timed events. We have to tell it which one we want it to return, and we've got 4, and they are numbered from 0. The first one is in the 0th position, and then this is the first, second and third. Okay, so by returning timed events to 0, nothing changes. What we do need to do is just, and I'll put numbers here instead, I'm going to change this to 1, 2, 3 and 4, and I'm also going to change this to 17, 18, 19 and 20, just so we can see changes, making sure things are working as predicted. Let's save that, So instead of returning the 0th one, if we decide to return the first one and we save that, when we restart, we now have our my event 2. Put it back to 0, my event 1. Okay, that's all very well and good, but we don't want to have to put a number in here. We need the system to work that out for us. Well, we're telling it it's got 4, and this item builder, don't worry about the context for now, we can ignore that, but the index is the index, the number of the item that's being built. So the first one will be 0, the second one will be 1, the third one will be 2, so on. So if we replace the index with the word index and save that, we've now got our 4 events showing up, just as we wanted. Excellent. So what happens when we put in our 5th event and our 6th event? They just show up, right? No, they don't. Why? Well, we're telling it here that we're only putting in 4. But now we've got more than 4. We've got 6. So we need to change that to 6. But again, we can't change that in our code all the time because we don't know how many events people have got. But what we can do is we can say timed events length. And that will work out for us the number that's in there. And when we restart our app, just like so, all the events show up. Excellent. So that is that. I'm just going to reset it. I was going to reset it back to 4. I want my 4 events. Okay. I'm having to reset the app, restart the app, because I'm changing a final list. If we stop messing around with this list, we won't need to restart it so often. Okay, so that's the first part done. That looks okay. But what we want to do is put a divider space, a line between each item. So how do we go about that? Well, I think the answer is to change, instead of list view builder, there is another type of list view which is separated. And now it's complaining that there's an error, and there's an error because we're not telling it something. And if we hover over and find out what it's not telling it, if we scroll to the bottom, it says try adding the required argument, which is the separator builder. So as well as the item builder, we now need to put in a separator builder, which works in exactly the same way. Let's put that in as exactly the same way as the item builder. Takes context and an index, like so, and we can return something. So we could return some text again. What does that do? It puts the word hello in between everything. Wonderful. Well, that's not quite what we want, but there is a widget that's pre-built for us called divider. Let's see what that does. Yeah, that's looking exactly like what we want. Okay, now there's also a shorthand. Because we're returning just one item, instead of putting the curly brackets and the return, we can use a shorthand notation, which the refactoring also will put in for us, where we can convert this to an expression body. Just cleans up the code a little bit. And when you're only returning an item, this is just a cleaner way of doing the same thing. And we can do the same thing with the timed events and get rid of the returned and everything else. This arrow is basically saying return the divider, return the timed event with this index. That won't make any visual changes. Right, that's looking quite good. Let's go back to our design a little bit and have a look at how we're doing. And if we look at the design, you can see that at the bottom of the list, the background is just a little bit more, is darker, basically. Okay, so we need to see if we can figure out how to do that. And the way I think we will do that is take our scaffold and set a background, sorry, let's turn that off so we can see what we're doing. Set a background color of colors gray, and we're going to stick in 200. Let's take a look at that. Okay, so what's happened? Well, it has gone grey, but we can't see it much yet. So within our event container, what we're going to need to do is set the color to white. Okay, that looks sort of okay. The problem there, of course, is now the background of these dividers isn't quite right. We're seeing through those, so we're going to have to do something about that. One of the things we can do, I think, the simplest way is to put our list view itself into a container and set the color of that container to be white, and that will force everything. Now we've got this new problem. It's our grey has disappeared completely, and that's because, like we saw with that column previously, it's taking up, this list view is taking up all the available space, and we don't want it to do that. So instead we're going to put shrink wrap true in here, and that will shrink down the list view to be just the size that it needs. So it'll grow as we need it to grow, and if there was 40 events, they would grow off the page and it would all be white. Okay, I think we're pretty much there at this stage. What we might want to do is put within the container a little bit of padding at the top and the bottom, and so we're going to put in edge inset. I'm just trying to think. Yeah, we just want it top and bottom, so we're going to put a vertical padding of 10. Let's have a look how that looks. Yeah, better. Okay, back to our design, and what we've got now is, if you can see, we've got a little menu at the top right hand side. I'm not sure what that menu does yet. We'll figure that one out, but we also need a way of adding a new timer event, and so we're going to go completely off script here because we've got no idea what the designer actually wanted. But what I'm going to do is put a little button at the top of our list to show a button to add an event. How do we go about doing that? Well, what we're going to have to do is undo what we did a second ago, and in our item builder for our time event, I'm going to revert this back to a block body, which is what we had originally, and we're going to do a little bit of coding here, and we're going to say if the index is 0, i.e. if it's the very first element, we're going to do something. We're going to return something different. Hello. Okay. Else we're going to return our timed event. Great. What's that going to do? Well, if we save that and have a look at it, we can now see event 0 has gone and it's been replaced with hello. Well, we don't really want that. We still want to see that event. So what we're going to have to do is force our list builder to think that there are more indexes than there really are. So how do we do that? Well, what we can do is where we have our item count, we can add a number to it, 1. So if there are 4 elements in our list widget, we're going to have 4 plus 1 is 5. Great, so now it's going to do 5 things. But this index is still going to be wrong because the first time around it's going to be 0, and so it's going to return this. The second time round it's going to be 1, and so it's going to return this, but it's going to return the first index, which is this one, not the 0th one. And eventually, when it gets around to the end, it's going to return 1 that doesn't even exist, and that's going to cause us a problem. But we can fix that by simply saying we're going to return the index minus 1. So when the index is 1, it's going to come here, and 1 minus 1 is 0, so it's going to return the 0th one. So if we save that now, we have all our events back, and we have our hello at the top. Okay, but hello at the top isn't quite what we want. We want to do something else. And instead of returning hello, we're going to return something new, which is a stack. Now a stack is sort of like a column and a row. It can contain multiple children. A list of children. Okay, and in our case what I want it to do is return an icon, and the icon I want it to return is icons add circle outlined, and this is going to be the icon to add a new timer event, create a new timer event. Okay, let's look at that. There we are, it's created that for us. Good, we'll format that in a minute. The other thing I want it to output is the icon, which is the 3 buttons, 3 dots. Let's look at our design, those 3 blue dot menu. Okay, so let's do that. We're going to return another icon, and it's going to be 3 lines. It's going to be the hamburger menu, like that, and save that. And now we've got 2 things on top of each other, and that's where the word stack comes from. It literally stacks things one on top of the other. Okay, not quite what we want. We need to take this menu item and we want to move it to the right hand side. So we can do that by wrapping it within an align widget and telling it the alignment that we want it to be. And the alignment is going to be alignment center right. Okay, and that's pushed that over where we want it. What about the circle outline? Where do we want that? Well, I want that to be in the very center. So I'm going to add another align, and I'm going to set the alignment for that one to be center. And there we go. Now we have it positioned as I want it to be positioned. Okay, now we just need to format it. So this icon here, the circular one, we're going to set a size to make it a little bit bigger of 35, and we're going to set a color to our app colors blue. That's fine. Okay, with our menu icon, we're going to do the same sort of thing. I think the size is probably all right, but we're going to set the color to our app colors blue as well. And I think we want to put a little bit of padding around it on the right hand side. We don't want it forced all the way over to the right. Now we could do that a number of ways. We could change the type of alignment and position it, and there are many ways of doing the same thing. In our case, I'm going to take a padding, and instead of putting a padding all the way around it, I'm going to put only on the right, and that will move it in just a little bit. And I think I'm happy with that for now. That will do. So this is now our main page, and I'm going to rename this. I'm going to create, instead of just having this container in here, I'm going to extract this widget to an event list widget, and that's going to create our stateless widget. And it's because we've already set it up, it's taking our timed events and passing it in. It created all that for us. Okay, so I'm going to do a hard restart of the app, make sure everything's working. And now we need to deal with our menu that has disappeared. When it hasn't disappeared, we took it out. And this is where the scaffold comes in, because the scaffold has a number of things built into it that makes our life super simple. And one of the things it has built into it is a drawer. Now if we take a drawer and pass in our sidebar and save that, you'll see no changes to our app until I come over here and drag in from the left hand side, and look at that, there is our drawer. Now we've got a few problems. One of the problems is it's this part down here is transparent. That's no use to us, we don't need that. So let's come to our sidebar, and where we could do this a number of ways. I think probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the column, I'm going to wrap it in a container, and I'm just going to set the color of that container to white. There we go. So now our side drawer is working almost perfectly. And I say almost perfectly because, as you can see, our profile image is shot off the top behind the status bar again. So I'm going to take that container, and I could add padding to the container, but I'm going to actually wrap it with another widget, and I'm going to put in a safe area there as well, so that the elements within our drawer will only ever appear within the safe area, and so will our main page. That's great, but we don't particularly want, if we look at our design, that drawer doesn't seem to come all the way across. So we don't want it to cover the whole area, we only want it to cover a portion of it. So if we come to our sidebar, we can set the width of our container to something. Let's take a number 300. What happens there? Well, that closes it down. But that doesn't really help us because that's a fixed number, and actually I want it to take up a percentage of the screen. So we can do that by calling media query of context, and we'll explain context in another app another time, but essentially it is information about where it currently is, where this widget is within the screen and within the app hierarchy. Size, width. Now that will return us a number which is the width of the screen in this case, and we can multiply that by 0.85, which is basically the same as saying give us 85% of the screen. And if we save that, our widget now takes 85% of the screen and works perfectly. Now the question is, do we want the people to open it? I mean, how do we know that sidebar is even there? It doesn't seem to be anything that tells us that. And I'm not sure I particularly want it to be opened in that way. So if we come back to our main menu where we have our draw, we can take our draw enabled open gesture and set that to false. What does that do? Well, it basically means our draw open gesture, which is the dragging, no longer works. Okay, so that sort of fixed one problem. It means you can't accidentally find it, but we do want it to appear. And I want it to appear, I think, when we hit this menu button up here. That seems to make a little bit of sense to me of how that should work. So let's come back to our icon for that, which is this icon here. And we're going to wrap all of this icon in another widget, which is called an icon button. And an icon button doesn't take a child, it takes an icon, and it also takes a function on pressed. So when the button is pressed, we want it to do something. And what we want it to do is we want it to find the scaffold, the nearest scaffold going up, and we want it to open the draw. Okay, let's click that now and see what happens. There we go, it opens it. So we can still slide it closed, and clicking anywhere in the background will close it, but clicking our button there works. And that, folks, is that. We've now got ourselves a app that is laid out as I roughly believe the designer wanted. We've taken some liberties here with this back screen for sure, but you know, I think we've done an alright job. Now all we need to do is make the thing work, and we'll start looking at that in the next episode. So folks, if you've enjoyed, don't forget to leave a like and a subscribe. If you want to be notified of when the next episode is out, hit the notification button as well, and we will see you next time when we will not be working on the design so much, but working on the actual code to make this timer work. Alright folks, take care. Bye now.